Hey folks, how you doing out there? Got a really interesting film for you tonight. We haven't brought anything by this individual to you yet. He's one of my favorite filmmakers, Luis Bunuel. Luis Bunuel, you might know him for Andalusian Dog, which is one of those films that I do want to bring to us later on. It's packaged with our version of Land Without Bread, which is one of his interesting documentaries, one of the few that he made, as a matter of fact. But we'll do that down the line. You might know him, though, if working with Salvador Dali in that grand surrealist moment. This film, well, Bunuel, he worked in a lot of different countries. He worked in Spain, worked in Italy, worked in France, even worked in the United States for a short time. People sort of forget this period of film that he was working in. This is his Mexican period. And what's interesting, he's making these films, right about the same time as our great Mexican horror film guys, like Abel Salazar and folks like that are working. Matter of fact, some of these same guys, his personnel and so on, and his actors are people who are going to be working on those Mexican horror films that we are also showing you. So, what film are we bringing you tonight? Well, this one is 1965, Simon of the Desert. Simon of the Desert deals with Simon of the Desert. Roll 'em, Smokey. No, okay, I'm kidding you. But it does deal with Simon of the Desert, okay, and it takes place in the 4th century, and here is this guy Simon who really wants to get himself closer to God. And in that ascetic tradition, he wants to, well, how does he do it? He builds a pillar, okay, he erects this big tall pillar with a little platform on the top, okay, out in the middle of the desert. And he sits on the top of it, and he spends a long time up there. People bring food for him and things like that. They bring him up through a rope, and they don't bring him a lot of good stuff. You don't get a hoagie or anything like that, He gets some, just your standard crusts of bread and stuff like that. Whatever people can spare. He's an ascetic, right? If he's eating a big, submarine or a sandwich of any variety up there, it might not look good for the ascetic tradition. But Simon's, he's up there, and what's cool about all of this is that Satan, okay, the devil himself, or herself, devil's played by Sylvia Pinal. Sylvia Pinal plays the devil who tries to, well, tempt him to come down from the pillar, right? Come on down, and she does all kinds of stuff. Sort of the retelling of the Jesus story to a certain extent, and having Satan coming to him and saying, cast yourself down on these stones, etc. Well, you get some of that going on in here. And, of course, I can't tell you if Simon gives in or not, but it's one of those temptation things. Sylvia Pinal also appeared in other Bunuel films, like Exterminating Angel. Hey, there's a good film. The man who plays Simon is Claudio Brook. And he was in Exterminating Angel. He was also in a number of those Mexican horror film products I was talking to you about. He was in a favorite of mine, Samson in the Wax Museum. Now, when you get a guy who's in a Bunuel film, who's also in Samson films and in Neutron versus the Death Robots, this is the kind of world I like to exist in. This is my kind of world. He was also in Dr. Tarr's Pit of Horror. What a great title that is. The cameraman on this film was Gabriel Figueroa, who also shot a couple other films for Bunuel. He shot Exterminating Angel and The Nazarene, which either of those films are really worthy of you seeing. Those are great Mexican products. He also worked with Sergei Eisenstein. He was the cameraman on Que Viva Mexico. Que Viva Mexico was that sort of aborted project that Eisenstein, when he came over from the Soviet Union, was working with the Sinclairs and folks like that. And it didn't get finished, but it certainly had some remarkable stuff. As a matter of fact, a little bit about this Simon of the Desert didn't necessarily get finished either. What you're seeing is a film that looks like it was near end of production, and they sort of ran out of dough or so. And I'm not going to go into too much about the ending of this because it's quite an interesting conclusion to this Simon of the Desert. Kind of a fun take on what the way to take Simon and his sense of temptation and in that direction. Well, I hope you're in store for a desert movie. Desert films tend to make you thirsty. You might want to get yourself a big glass of soda, okay, something to drink. if you're eating some popcorn right now, it's going to be kind of salty anyway, right? So, I'm hoping that you do eat popcorn while you watch this. I can't imagine anything else. Okay, this is one of those films that you're going to have to stay planted in front of that TV there that whole time through this thing, because it's a fascinating movie. Bunuel, one of the great satirists of all time, taking on one of his favorite subjects, satirizing organized religion. If you know Bunuel, you know I'm not talking out of the top of my hat, I don't think. And if you don't know Bunuel, this is a nice little introduction to him. Simon of the Desert, 1965, one of his great Mexican products. It would have been cool if he were able to go over there and work in the, make his own mark on Mexican horror films with his own, like a Neutron versus the Death Robots or something like that. Gosh, Bunuel would, I'd love to see him do that. I think he would handle that well. Well, have fun with it. Roll 'em, Smokey.